Let me tell you about the moment you realize no one is coming for you. No aircraft, no extraction team, no friendly voice crackling through on the radio telling you to move to the pickup point. Nothing. Just silence, dead, heavy silence, and the jungle pressing in on all sides like it already knows exactly what just happened to you. That moment hit me in late '68. I was running with SOG Studies, an observation group operating out of a forward staging area just across a border that officially we were never near. Let me be perfectly clear, we were not supposed to be there. The mission did not exist on paper. And when the Exfil got canceled, that cancellation included the part where somebody came back to collect me. I had been on the ground 5 days with 2 indigenous fighters, Montagnard tribesmen, good men, both of them, men who knew that terrain the way I know my own hands. We had been running a reconnaissance track along a supply corridor the North Vietnamese Army used every night. Well-worn trail, steady traffic, ammunition, food, replacement troops moving south in the dark. My job was clean and simple. Observe, count, document, get out. Report what I saw. Simple does not mean easy. The pickup was scheduled for just after 9 in the evening. Clear sky that night, and that clarity made it worse because I could see the stars sharp and clean overhead, and there was no aircraft up there. Not a sound, just those stars, the jungle, and me kneeling beside a narrow game trail with my ear against the radio, cycling through every frequency I had. Nothing. I tried CW continuous wave, Morse code, figured if voice comms were compromised, maybe a short burst of code would cut through. I tapped it out, waited, cycled again, dead. Radio was functioning, frequency was correct, nobody was there. When your exfil gets canceled, there are reasons: weather moved in fast, a compromise somewhere in the chain, an emergency that pulled all available assets, some shirtbird sitting in a chair in Saigon making a command decision he had no business making. I didn't know which it was that night, and I couldn't know. What I knew was cold and simple. I was not getting out tonight. Some men, that realization freezes solid. Good men, brave men, they hit a wall when the plan dies. I understand it. Your brain wants to chase the problem backward, figure out who dropped the ball, where the chain broke. Natural response. Completely useless response. You process the situation as it stands right now, this second, and you make the next decision. My next decision was to move. Get away from that pickup point immediately. If anyone in the chain had information on my extraction location and in SOG operations, someone always knew that position was now potentially compromised. I told my 2 men, in their language, short, we move, long way, stay quiet. Good men always understand when the plan changes. They don't argue, they just move. We moved. And that night began 22 days of the hardest evasion and blend-in work I ever did in my career. The first rule of evasion is the first rule of survival. Move. Move and don't stop moving. If you stay in the same spot, they'll have your ass just from observing from 500 yards away. That was drilled into me early in SF, but living it, truly living it, 22 days straight in an active enemy corridor that is a different education than any classroom ever gave me. We put 3 kilometers behind us that first night before I gave the word to find cover. 3 kilometers through thick triple canopy jungle, moving by feel, by sound, by the occasional shaft of moonlight that punched down through the canopy. No lights, no noise above a whisper, just movement, one careful foot at a time. Here are something civilians do not fully appreciate about moving through jungle at night. The jungle is loud. Loud, loud, loud. Insects, frogs, night birds, the constant drip of moisture off leaves. That noise is your friend. That noise is cover. You move inside it and you become part of it. What you listen for is the jungle going quiet. When it stops talking, something has disturbed it. Something is out there. You freeze, you wait, you let it start back up before you take another step. I had learned that lesson years earlier in SF. I applied it every single night of those 22 days, without exception. We found a rest position in a steep draw before first light, dense brush on three sides, a dry creek bed below us as an escape route if we needed to move fast. I put the 2 men on rotation, one watching, one resting, and I took the first watch myself, 3 hours on, 2 hours off. You cannot let fatigue make your decisions. Fatigue gets you killed just as fast as a bullet. In the daylight, I took stock of what we had. Ammunition, food not much, but enough for several days. Water purification tablets. The radio, now useless for extraction, but still worth monitoring for enemy traffic. My camera, a small compact thing I never went into the field without. My maps. And my field notebook, tight handwriting, 5 days of reconnaissance observations already inside it. All of that was documentation, and all of it was valuable. You write, you record, you document every single time without fail. You never know which piece of the record is going to matter when you get back, if you get back. The question in front of me was not simply survival. It was surviving without being compromised. There is a real difference between the two. Surviving in a remote area with no enemy contact is hard but manageable. Surviving in an active corridor that the NVA was using nightly with troops and supplies moving through on a schedule that required more than hiding, it required integrating, blending into the environment so completely that the environment stopped being a threat. Let me tell you what integrating actually meant in practice. I am an American. I am a large man by the measure of anyone in that region. I was operating in a zone where the North Vietnamese Army was actively hunting American SF and SOG personnel. There is no version of this where I pass for local. That reality was fixed. So I had to approach it differently, keep myself completely off the trails, away from any population centers, and use my 2 Montagnard men as my interface with the world. They were the cover. They could move through certain areas, make contact with village contacts, listen, gather information, and come back to me. I stayed back in the tree line, parallel to trails, but never on them, keeping the trails in sight but invisible from them. A ghost with a notebook and a camera. Night movement became the absolute rule after that first day. After 9 in the evening, I owned the darkness. The NVA were disciplined fighters, effective, motivated, organized. But after dark, especially past 9 or 10 at night, they pulled back to their positions and settled in. Fires going by midnight, comfortable, relaxed. And that comfort gave me a 5-hour operational window every single night, 9 until 2 in the morning, in which I could move with something approaching freedom. Inside that window, I advanced position, collected observations, documented what I saw, and then before 2 in the morning, I was in cover and invisible again, waiting for the next night to do it all over. On day 3, a problem that had been building became immediate food. We were not critically low, but low enough that I needed to address it before it became a crisis. The older of my 2 men, I will call him Tuong, not his real name, but he deserves one, had a contact in a small hamlet about 4 kilometers north of our position. A relative, close enough. He believed he could move in quietly, gather food and any local intelligence, and return to us. I said yes. I said yes because I trusted Tuong the way you only trust a man who has been in the field with you and has not once made a bad decision. That kind of trust is earned slowly, and it is one of the most valuable things you can build in this work. He went. He was gone 11 hours. Those 11 hours were not comfortable hours. I sat in that draw with the younger man watching every approach, running contingencies in my head the whole time. If Tuong did not return, if he returned with company following him, if we heard shooting from the direction of the hamlet, none of that happened. He slipped back into the draw just after dark on the second day, quiet as a cat, and laid out what he had brought. Rice, dried fish, some fruit, and more important than any of it, information. The hamlet had been visited 2 days prior by an NVA political officer moving with a 4-man escort. The officer had spoken directly to the village headman. Was there any sign of enemy infiltration in the area? Had anyone seen unusual activity in the surrounding jungle? The headman, who was no friend of the NVA but also no fool, said no to everything and kept his face neutral the whole time. Smart man, smart man. But the fact that they were asking questions meant they had reason to ask. Someone up the chain knew an SF element had been operating in this corridor and had not been extracted on schedule. They were not certain of my position, but they were actively looking. That changed everything for week 2. I pulled the element back from the corridor and repositioned west toward higher ground. My reasoning was straightforward. The NVA was patrolling the low ground hard, the supply trail, the approaches, the near jungle on both sides. A political officer asking questions in local villages meant the search was radiating outward from their known corridor. They would check the obvious terrain first. They would push patrols into the near jungle on both flanks of the trail. They would not expect anyone on the high ground. That terrain was rough, steep, heavily vegetated, poor footing, no trails worth the name. Nobody operated up there without a specific reason. It was exactly where I needed to be. We moved on a night when cloud cover gave us near total darkness. I mean that literally. I could not see my hand held in front of my face. Moving by feel, feet finding purchase one careful step at a time, reading the slope through the soles of my boots. Kit, the younger man, that is what I will call him, took point and felt the trail ahead with his feet. I followed with one hand on his shoulder. Tuong followed behind me the same way. 3 men moving through absolute darkness up a hostile hillside in single file, connected by touch. 4 hours to cover 1.5 kilometers. 4 hours. 4 hours. But we made it silent. Not a rock displaced, not a branch snapped. We reached the high ground and found a strong position, a rock outcropping with brush below it, and clear lines of sight down the valley on 2 sides. I put the men down in cover and I stood at the edge of the outcropping and looked out at the valley below. I could see the faint thread of the supply trail in the moonlight. Could see the darkness where the tree line thickened around what I suspected was a command position. First thing I did when we settled was make notes. Drew a rough sketch of the terrain below, mapped what I could see. Noted the location of a cluster of structures just inside the tree line down the valley, with wire strung between 2 tall trees above them. That wire told me something important. An antenna. Where there is an antenna, there is a radio. Where there is a radio, someone important enough to require communication is present. I sketched it. I noted the position as accurately as I could read it from elevation. And I photographed it. Long distance with the telephoto lens I carried, small photographs, but real photographs. Photos beat a pile of written description every single time. They show exactly what was there, no interpretation required. No one can dispute what is in the frame. On about day 11, something happened that I want to spend time on because it speaks to a principle I have believed in my entire career. I spotted an NVA soldier who had separated from his unit. He came up a side trail on the high ground. What he was doing up there, I cannot say for certain. Maybe answering a call of nature, maybe just wandering. He was alone, rifle slung loose, maybe 40 meters below my position. Young man, I could see that clearly, relaxed, not in any kind of combat posture. I watched him, long enough to confirm he was alone, that he had not seen me, that there was no trail element below following him at distance. Now let me tell you what went through my mind, because some people assume the answer in this situation is obvious. It is not obvious. Nothing in this work is obvious if you are thinking clearly. The fast answer is that I removed the threat. Enemy combatant, hostile territory, within engagement range, clean and tactically simple. But killing is easy. Killing is always easy. What I do not have after I engage this man is silence. I do not have continued concealment on the high ground. I have a shot fired or a close quarters contact that tells every NVA element in this valley that someone is operating up here. I lose a position. I lose 2 days of documentation built from this outcropping, and I have a body to account for. What do I have if I take him alive? A source, a young NVA soldier who knows his unit's movement patterns, radio schedule, command structure, where they are heading next. That is intelligence that shapes operations. But I was a three-man element with no extraction, no comms reaching anyone, deep inside hostile territory. Taking a prisoner alive under those conditions is not an option. A prisoner requires control, restraint, silence, movement, and anything that compromises my ability to move fast and quiet right now is a death sentence for all three of us. I let him go, absolutely still, controlled my breathing, gave the two men the hand signal, nothing, do not move, do not even shift your weight. The young NVA soldier stood at the edge of the high trail, looked out over the valley, probably just taking in the view the way young men do when they have a private moment, and then he turned and walked back down the way he had come. He never saw me, never knew I was there. Killing is easy. Making the correct decision about when not to kill that is hard. That discipline, that restraint, applied at the moment when action feels instinctive and waiting feels wrong. That is what separates a professional operator from someone just running on reflex. The mission required I remain undetected. The mission came first. The mission always comes first. By the end of week 2, I had that field notebook half full. Patrol patterns, troop numbers, equipment observations, the antenna position and structure layout, movement timing data from 3 nights of direct observation. The NVA were moving supplies on the same window I was moving. After 9 in the evening, because they knew American air assets owned the daylight. 2 sides working the same darkness for opposite reasons. I also started jogging, short runs, early morning, back and forth along the ridge before the heat built up. My 2 men thought it was strange behavior at first, but they came to understand the logic. If any local civilian happened to spot me, a farmer on a high track, a woodcutter working the slopes, an American man jogging registers as bizarre but not threatening. It does not look like a man in hiding. It looks like a man doing something inexplicable that Americans apparently do. That confusion buys a moment, and a moment in this work is sometimes all you need. Day 18. Real problem. The radio batteries were failing. I had been running the set on receive only, not transmitting, just monitoring, hoping to pull a fragment of friendly traffic, a call sign, anything that told me what the situation was outside my position. I was picking up mostly NVA traffic, which I could follow well enough to know they were still actively searching the low ground, still running patrols, still coming up dry. They had not found me, but they had not stopped looking either. What I needed was a way to signal without a radio, something that required no battery power, produced no detectable electronic signature, could not be triangulated by an enemy listening post. I had a mirror. Not a purpose-built military signal mirror, a plain personal mirror, small, flat. Back at the staging area, I had taken a round awl and punched 2 small holes through the center close together. Simple modification, old technique, older than any of the technology I was carrying. You hold the mirror up with the sun at your back, you sight the target through those 2 center holes, you angle the reflection onto the aircraft. On a clear day, a mirror that size can throw a flash visible at 15 miles if your angle is right. I had not used it because I had not had predictable air traffic directly over my position. The supply corridor below attracted some attention, but nothing that passed overhead on a consistent bearing I could count on. Day 19, the pattern shifted. A high-altitude aircraft too high to type identify from the ground. Just a glint of sunlight on metal and the distant sound of engines passed over on a consistent bearing. Middle of the afternoon, around 2:30, maybe 2:45, 2 consecutive days, nearly the same time, nearly the same track. Altitude and profile said reconnaissance, not combat. Someone was working that valley systematically. Day 21. I was ready. I positioned myself flat on the open rock face of the outcropping with the sun angled correctly at my back. Mirror in my right hand. 2 holes aligned on the track the aircraft had been using. Waited. watched the sky. When I picked up the aircraft, I started flashing, held the beam as steady as I could, adjusted continuously as the aircraft moved across the sky, keeping the reflection tracking with it. Flash, flash, flash. Long, deliberate flash. Pause. Pattern. Keep it going. For a long stretch, nothing changed. The aircraft held its track, steady, no deviation. I kept flashing. Then it banked. Not a dramatic turn. A subtle correction. A slight change in heading. Coming back around toward my position on a slightly different line. I kept the mirror working. Kept the beam on it. Kept the pattern going. The aircraft passed directly overhead, maybe 8,000 or 9,000 feet up, and then I heard it. The engine note changed. Deliberate throttle increase, held for 2 or 3 seconds, then back to cruise once. Clean, intentional. They had me. They saw the flash. They confirmed with a motor rev because transmitting directly back to me on any frequency would have broken their communication security and potentially exposed the operation. 1 engine rev. That was the whole message. That was all I needed. I looked at Tuong. He looked at me. This man who had been calm and steady and silent for 21 days allowed himself one thing, a slow, quiet smile. Kiet, the younger man, let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding since the night the radio went dead. I went immediately to the notebook. Wrote it all down. Time of signal, bearing of aircraft, altitude estimate, mirror technique used, engine acknowledgement received, number of flashes sent, everything. Documented completely. Because when you come out of the field, if you come out, you want to be able to show exactly what happened, how it happened, and what the result was. Photographs, notes, records, documentation is the mission as much as anything else you did out there. Extraction came on day 22, just after 9 in the evening. A helicopter running blacked out, no lights, coming in low and fast to a small clearing on the high ground that I had identified and spent my final 2 nights quietly clearing of brush. I had marked it with chemical light sticks, tiny, nearly invisible to anyone not looking directly at them from overhead, but enough for a pilot who knows exactly what he is hunting for in the dark. The aircraft was on the ground 45 seconds. I put Tuong on first, then Kiet. Then I got on and we lifted before the skids had fully settled back onto the earth. The crew chief said nothing. I said nothing. We just went. I sat in the back of that helicopter looking down at the jungle canopy sliding away below us, black and absolute in the darkness. I thought about those 22 days, the thousands of individual decisions, each one either the right call or the last call. The young NVA soldier on the ridge who walked home that night with no idea how close he had come to never walking anywhere again. The 4 hours of darkness to cover 1.5 kilometers, the mirror flashing in an aircraft 15 miles above, the notebook, the photographs, the 2 men sitting across from me in the dark who had trusted me for 22 days and were still alive because of it. A warrior is a guy that wishes to be involved. Period. Not complicated, just present, just in it. I had been in it 22 days, every single one. 3 things kept me alive out there. Not equipment, not luck, not firepower, first movement, never stop moving. Never let yourself become a fixed point that an enemy can locate, track, and close on. Fixtures get found. The moment I left that pickup point and kept moving, I started controlling the situation instead of the situation controlling me. Move, move, move. Second, documentation. I came out of that jungle with a notebook half full of intelligence sketches, timing data, antenna positions, patrol patterns, and photographs to back every single piece of it. That was the mission. Not just surviving the 22 days completing the intelligence collection I had gone in to do. Write, record, document, photograph, every time without exception. Do not tell me what you saw, show me. Third discipline over instinct. That young soldier on the ridge, the correct decision was patience, stillness, and restraint. Not because he did not represent a threat, but because the mission required I stay hidden and that discipline held steady at the exact moment instinct screamed otherwise is what the work actually demands. Easy to pull a trigger. Hard to hold your hand when every nerve in your body says act. 22 days in a war zone on your own is nothing but a long string of decisions. You make the right one each time you get on that helicopter. You make the wrong one, you do not. Never quit. Never quit. Never quit. I am Billy. Stay in the fight.